The Wellness Show, Episode 31.
Welcome to The Wellness Show, a podcast on health and wealth. I'm your host, Tyson Bannigan, the founder of the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy. Join me as we get the latest insight, tips, and strategies from wellness providers, coaches, and successful, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and much, much more. So welcome to The Wellness Show, and on the call today we have Gilly Thomas, and today's topic is the power of touch. And there's lots to say about this. So Gilly, could you please introduce yourself and how did you come upon the power of touch? How did that come about in your life?
I actually work with touch in my practice. I'm a therapist, a body-mind therapist, and I studied with Alana Rubenfeld for 4 years in New York, learning the Rubenfeld Synergy Method, which is about using touch and talk to work with somebody. And what the touch does in the work that I do is it helps bridge a connection between myself and my client. It also helps bridge the emotional and energetic beings so that things aren't only coming from an intellectual place, but it's a place of connection. And because I've worked with touch for so long now, for about 20 years, I got interested. I find it really interesting. I think Alana was way ahead of her time, and they're finally getting the science behind why things like touch is powerful, how the mind is neuroplastic. All of those things are now starting to get some research and some scientific background to it. So my background is I've been working with touch for 20 years, and then with the power of touch, I thought, wow, there's so much power in people's touch, and it's often in our society an unaccessed power.
So say more about that. Did I hear you say that it's misinterpreted as power, or what did you say?
Okay, I lost you there. I got the first part and the last part of
No,
that.
you said something about touch in our society. What were you saying?
Oh, how touch is powerful, and people don't know what a wonderful, gentle tool it is to connect with other people. What I hear more and more from people is how lonely they are, how disconnected they are from people, how they don't know how to connect. And the other thing I hear is on the media, anytime that touch is talked about, it's usually in terms of violence or in terms of sexual misuse of touch. There isn't anything that is out there that just says, well, touch is a very basic human form of communication and connection. And so that's where my curiosity comes from. It's like, why is everybody so, when all they really need to do is reach out and touch another human being to feel connected?
So for lots of people, then you're saying that this is a scary thing for them. Is that because of the way that we're raised, do you think? Or do you think that they maybe were deprived from having being touched as a child? What do you think might be some of the reasons why a touch is not so much a part of our culture?
I think as a Canadian, people come here from all over the world. And some places, some cultures, people are very comfortable with touch. So you can have somebody who comes from Puerto Rico, for example, where they'll touch somebody, two friends talking at a luncheon will reach out and touch each other 180 times. In France, apparently over a course of an hour, it's 120 times.
Wow.
In the UK, the United States, it's 0 times, maybe once, and that's between two good friends. So you have Canada, and people come here from all over the world with different understandings of touch. And the general culture, our general culture is, yes, touch is scary. I shouldn't reach out and touch somebody. People pull back, pull away from it.
That's interesting because, I'm part of the Tao, which is Chinese. So I have a lot of Chinese friends, and I know when they came from Taiwan to bring the Tao, the whole idea of actually being hugged was so foreign to them. That was something that they had to get used to being around Canadians, that certainly some people, some of us, are huggers. So they had to get used to that's just the way we greet each other. That we not only learn how to bow in the way of the Tao, but we also, they had to learn how to be hugged and feel all right about that. So you're really right. There's so many things that are culturally specific about what's allowed or what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable when it comes to touch and expressing our emotions.
Hmm. And especially when people move into a different culture and it's unfamiliar, then already the environment is scary. And so for somebody, it may feel like an automatic response is to reach out and hug someone or reach out and touch someone. If that is met by somebody pulling back, then what it teaches people is to pull back. And I would love that to change. It's interesting that you bring up the Chinese Tao, because when I was developing my course on the power of touch, I sent out a project study for people to do, and then got feedback from them. And one of the comments was from a woman who was of Chinese descent, and she said, this is invaluable to learn how to touch somebody, because in our culture we don't do it, and so we don't know how to do it, and we don't know how valuable it is and how good it feels. And I thought that was fascinating reflection of the cultural differences. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I remember one of the people I worked with was from Peru. From Chile, and to get used to, as two guys, he's a big guy like me, hugging was just totally accepted. We just couldn't be around each other without touching and hugging. And to get used to that, I have to say I miss that in our culture. But it doesn't feel like I can do that. But with some cultures, like certainly in the Latino cultures, that's just very much part of expressing who you are, and the joy of being together and the friendship, and even hugging, even kissing is allowed, man to man. It's just part of showing up and being present.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so many different ways to reach out and touch someone, right? And when people come from a culture where it is comfortable, then it's easy. It's like there's so many different words, there's so many different gestures and how to touch. And then you bring that together with people who not only don't know how to touch, but as I said earlier, in the media, a lot of what people are taught is that touch is scary. Touch is used in assault, touch is used in rape, touch is used inappropriately. I used to be a teacher before I became a therapist. And one of the things that I was told 25 years ago was not to touch my students. And I said, I can't, I'm not that kind of person. I have to touch my student. If somebody's hurting, I'd like to reach out and put my hand on their shoulder, or if they're talking to me, just put my hand on their knee, just as a way of saying, hey, I'm here, and I'm with you. And I was told, well, don't do that. And if you have to do it, then leave the door of the classroom open so that nobody misinterprets your touch. And I was talking to some friends of mine recently about the whole topic, and they were saying nowadays they even teach people who are working with kids in sports teams, instead of, like if you get a goal and everybody's like, yeah, we got a goal, that's fantastic. Instead of slapping somebody on the back or giving someone a high five, they're teaching kids now to do air high fives so that they don't touch hands. They go, yeah, we did it. And that contact, that enthusiasm, the excitement isn't communicated through the touch because they're not allowed to touch anymore. Not even kids to kids. And, the interesting thing again about this is that they've studied now at NBA, right, professional basketball, and they found that teams that do touch, that do slap each other in the back, that high five each other, that pat each other on the butt when a good play is made, those teams actually work much better as a team and they win more games and they're more successful. And yeah, the communication is just there in a different way, which seems so obvious to me, but it's also really fascinating that they're doing that research and finding that out, which is so contrary to what people are taught at at school age now. School age. No, don't touch each other. Don't touch your students. It's bad. To me, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I know as a male, it gets confusing too. Being sort of a touchy-feely guy, what's allowed and what isn't allowed to do with the opposite sex without it being misinterpreted. So, I mean, even having those thoughts in my head really gets in the way of just, for me, showing up and being naturally who I am. So I really feel it's unfortunate our culture is getting so uptight about this whole process. To me, there's so much evidence that if a baby doesn't have the necessary touch and bonding with its mother, it's going to have lots of complications in its life. So you would think that we knew better, that touch is so fundamental for our own human evolution and growth. I just can't understand why we're going the other way. Is it because we're afraid of all of the sexual connotations to it, or the violence behind it, like you say? What's your take on all this?
Well, my take is that people are afraid because of the sexual connotations, because of the violence, and because our media is really fear-based and fear-focused. And so what is going to get covered, or what's going to be presented to people, is the negative aspects of touch, rather than the positive aspects. Because it's not only found that, how babies, touch affects babies when they're developing, not only throughout their life, but also in the moment of their development. They did this study in Korea at an orphanage where they had babies that weren't touched at all, which was the norm. And then they had babies who were touched professionally, kind of like a massage, and it was a very scripted touch. It was something like 15 minutes a day for 5 days over a course of 4 weeks. And in that period of time, the babies that were touched compared to the babies that were not touched, the babies who were touched gained weight, which is what babies are supposed to do. They grew taller. So it's extraordinary in a way that it would have such a profound effect. In another way, it's not surprising at all, because they've also found that touch relaxes people. It takes people from a place of feeling stressed and uncomfortable to feeling calm and relaxed. It will reduce heart rate. It will reduce breathing rate. They did other studies with people who were going into medical exams, and I can't remember, it was an MRI or a CAT scanner. And there were women who were going into the machine. And if they had a partner, their husband or wife was there holding their hand as they went into the machine, their heart rate was lower, their breathing rate was lower, they were a lot more relaxed. Whereas the women who didn't have somebody there, everything was elevated. So it reduces stress. And there's so many things out there too now that are available if people are anxious. If you're anxious, then take a pill. If you're anxious, do this. What if you're anxious? Just give someone a hug, or get a hug from someone, or reach out and touch someone. Yeah.
Or hug a tree.
Yeah, trees are wonderful. I love hugging trees myself. It is different than hugging a human being, or hugging something that's alive, or touching something that's alive.
Well, they're alive. It's just a difference, I guess, for people that have trouble hugging other people. Well, go hug a tree at least.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I considered in my course, right? Is that some people, they'll have so much resistance to it that they won't be able to reach out and touch someone. So I chunked it down for people so that you start by just imagining touching someone and noticing how that feels. And then not actually touching somebody, but imagining kind of starting to make the movement, but it being such a small movement that you don't actually touch someone, and then actually touching someone. So that there are ways for people to kind of gradually ease into something that's foreign or scary or different, and it's quite exciting, actually. The feedback that I've got from people is that it makes it accessible, because you're right, for some people the thought of touching someone is scary.
Yeah, it is. The other thing that I've found is that not only is it therapeutic with touch, that I've had the experience of working with young children where I've actually had the experience of really deep, fundamental healing. I mean, profound healing happening just from touch. So there's way more to this than meets the eye. There's many, many layers to this that once we allow ourselves to do this, we can bring about incredible healings for each other when we allow the energy from the touch to do the transformative healing in another person, so that they can allow the energy to flow in themselves in new ways that they weren't able to do before they were touched. So, I've had the first-hand experience of literally experiencing medically a before and after with a young child, that I spent most of my time just hugging the person, not accepting the medical diagnosis, and just loving them unconditionally. And literally, I guess from a scientific point of view, the only way you could explain the results was that it was a miracle. But I know it was just the touch. So I really think that what you're doing is extremely important. If we can help people understand the power of touch, not only therapeutically, but as a healing, deep, deep transformative healing, then we're going to be so much more better to live in a peaceful planet, as we're allowing our emotions to flow in ways in which, we're out of the way of them being judged as good or bad or right or wrong. So tell me a little bit more. I mean, I love the idea that you take people from different cultures and give them different ways in which they can come closer and closer to get close to being close to each other without even touching. So do you do this online as well, or do you do it in workshops only?
I started as a workshop where I was working with a group of people, and then I thought, it would be nice to bring this to have it more accessible to more people. So I do have an online workshop now that people can take, and I, it's the first one that I've developed. I'm in the process of getting my workshops online, and I was hesitant because I was like, I don't know. It's different for me to be with people where I can reach out and touch them either physically or just energetically, and then to trust that I could put something online and it would have an impact. I was uncertain about that, and I was blown away actually by how wonderful it was for people, and how, as you said, how healing. And I think for me, the work I do is really deep transformational therapy. I know it is. That's the work that I do. What I want to do with this course, or by even bringing up the topic for conversation for other people to start talking about it or realizing how much they use it in their life, is that when you introduce something in your life where you are touching more and you do realize how touch impacts you, and you just take that extra moment and let that awareness settle in, then that's really transformational, because you bring it into integrating it. It's into part of your life. I had one woman take the course, and she said she was a caregiver. She worked with seniors before, and then she worked with children. And she said she always felt like she was reaching out to touch other people, so her touch was giving care to others. And when she took the course, she said, you know what, it amazed me, because I realized that actually when I touch people, they're also touching me. I'm making contact with them. And in that contact, there is an incredible gift for myself as well as for the people I make contact with. So it was just like a shift of awareness for her, because she was already touching. It was like, well, what is it? What does it do and how does it land? Yeah.
That's a beautiful statement. You know, as caregivers or wellness providers, we're so used to giving. And it takes us a while to realize, like you said, that the gift of receiving is just as vital. That sometimes, you know, after a session, I'm almost not sure who should be paying who, because of the experience that I've had from working with a client that really was, in their opening up, allowed me to open up to new levels of awareness that I didn't have before. So when it comes to touch, I can understand that the same could occur. So how do we do this? I mean, I can see that touch, you know, we touch one person, another person, but it seems like we need to be doing group hugging, or we need to be doing it more collectively, or we need to be able to do it in some way. I guess the closest we have to that is, like you said, is somebody scoring on a team and then everybody getting excited and sharing that, or maybe at a rock concert or something like that. But even that is sort of separated. You know, what sort of things can you imagine that would allow that group experience to have that group hug? Because it really is that heart to heart to heart to heart connection that's going to be so transformative for us to move us past this fear-based, you know, culture that we're in, where we have to be, you know, cautious about everything, which really starts to close our hearts down. Any idea?
I would, what I would suggest is that sometimes less is more. And so sometimes somebody just, you know, putting a hand on their own heart and letting themselves feel that the connection of their own hand with their own heart and the touch that exists there, so that they know what that feels like. And then once people have the confidence or the sensation of what that is, then they can share it with someone else. And if they share it in a sense of knowing what it's like really in their body, instead of doing it from I think this is a good idea, it might work, you know, but oh yeah, what do I notice when I put my hand on my heart? There's a lot of warmth there. There's the softness. There's a desire to connect. And, you know, so when somebody comes from a place of knowing where they're at in their own touch, and then they reach out to somebody else, that's how I think the ripple effect can happen. So that's how I imagine doing it. And then I go to places, like I go to you know, a sports event or something, like at the Olympics, and everybody's like, yay, and the whole crowd is, you know, clapping hands and joining hands, and there's a lot of joy. Then that also heightens it, but in a different way, where you have to be in a certain environment. Whereas I think when people start themselves, it can ripple out.
Yeah, I think there's something really powerful about the kinesthetic touch that you're talking about, and the transformative nature. I'm thinking, wouldn't it be amazing? And I don't know if you do this in your workshop, you probably already do. Do you do sort of like what I would call a daisy chain from person to person to person, so that there's a group hug, so to speak?
I work with people so that they start off by connecting with themselves first, and then with one other person. Partly because there can be, you know, when something's really loud, it can be too loud, it can be overwhelming, and so people
too overwhelming. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
So they kind of build up to that daisy chain connection effect. And yes, it does get to that point, but it's a build. It's a building blocks.
Yeah, you can see where I want to go right away, you know, into the group hug. Yeah, there's integrative steps, and we don't want to rush anybody, right? We don't want to overwhelm them and blow their circuits. But yeah, you know, the group hug is, when it happens, is pretty amazing, right? That energy, that feeling that comes from oneness.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't usually happen, like you say. Oh, it usually takes a period of time of people to being together in the same room and at a workshop or doing something together for at least a day, sometimes 2 days before that becomes spontaneously something that you want to share. So you're absolutely right. You can't run into a room and do a group hug. I mean, it's just a little bit too much. So yeah, the really interesting work that you're called to do, and I love the whole concept. So do you take this to children's hospitals, or have you thought about those sorts of things? I would think that that's one place where touch would be really significant, would be in a children's ward.
I haven't thought of doing that specifically. It's a great idea for sure. I think my vision or my goal is that people reach out and touch each other, in the street, on the bus, making contact with a homeless person, whatever. Because again, I think that when people break down their own barriers in their daily life, then when it's something or somewhere like a children's hospital, then it'll be easy for somebody who's going in to visit a sick child to go, oh yeah, I'm just going to make contact with them. An interesting story too. I've had some really powerful experiences, personal experiences with touch. And I was invited into a deathbed scenario in Burma, in Myanmar. I was looking for my mom. My mom was my mom's history. She was born there. Mm-hmm. And I went back to the town that she was in before she left. And I was invited into this deathbed scenario. And I was, as a North American, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know you guys. I couldn't possibly come in at such an intimate moment in time. And they said, well, of course you have to come because he's the only man in the village who was alive when your mother was here, and he may remember her. So please come in. So I went into this room, and what blew me away was that all of the people that were in there were touching the man in the bed. Everybody had a hand on his leg, a hand on his arm, a hand on his head, petting and stroking him, contacting him. And I just thought, wow, there is so much love and support in this room. It's phenomenal. Yeah. So hospitals connect that.
I love that. It takes a community. I never thought of it. It takes a community to raise a child, and why not have a community to help somebody to transition? I mean, what a beautiful concept that is. Instead of a lonely, event that we create in our culture that nobody wants to be there and, almost avoid at all costs.
Yeah, totally different. Wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, have you got a Facebook where people can share their stories of intimacy or the experience of learning how to hug and what their experiences are? Have you created a place where people can share these stories?
That's a very good question. I've created a group for people who have taken my course. Mm-hmm. And shared their stories there. It's a secret group on Facebook because of the nature of the course. It just kind of keeps it that way. I love your idea though of having a place where people can share their stories. I do have a Facebook page. It's Gilly Thomas, and it's my name. Yeah. I'm trying to remember because there's several Gilly Thomases out there. I live in Vancouver, BC, so if somebody look up Gilly Thomas Vancouver, I'm sure they'd find it.
Well, you can send me all the links and we'll put them into the show notes so people can find you. I would love to encourage you to have an open group as well as your closed group, just so you can share that, and so that all of your students can also be on that page and share their experiences. If we can get a multiplier effect out of this, right, where it really becomes part of what people do, right? I'm thinking, and its laughter is different, but I'm thinking of that video of the guy who gets on the subway and starts to laugh, and everybody thinks he's crazy. By the time he gets off, the whole subway is laughing, and you see him on the next subway going the opposite way, starting it all over again. So I think people are ready for this sort of spontaneous, almost crowdfunding or crowd whatever experience. I know hugging, we can't do it that way because we're going to blow people's circuits, but we can at least do one person to one person, sort of like paying it forward. I mean, that would work without.
And stories are so powerful.
Yeah.
That touch people's hearts too. Yeah, and you're right. It doesn't have to be in an open group. Would be a wonderful idea. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, those stories are the basis of your book too, right?
Absolutely. How did you know I was working on a book?
Well, I would hope you're working on a book. This is really powerful stuff.
Thank you.
So what's the book going to be called? Do you know yet?
I don't know yet. The name of the course is The Power of Touch, and it's called that because it's simple and it's clear and it's true. So it'll be something like that.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the name of your book too, The Power of Touch. I love it. I love what you're doing. So once again, how do people get hold of you?
My website is workingwithwellness.ca.
Great.
Yeah.
And you have, okay. And so what would you like to leave everybody with? Us all unhuggable people that are not used to hugging, what are some of the tips you'd like to leave us with?
I would like to say to you, take a moment and say hello to your hands and let your hands say hello to each other and feel what it's like when they make contact with each other. And then take one hand and put it somewhere on yourself and let yourself feel what that's like. And then consider what that would be like to reach out and connect with somebody else from that place. So whatever configuration of that you're comfortable with. I know you're comfortable with a lot more. So whatever somebody's at, to start there. Mm-hmm.
I like it one step at a time. I love it. And if you're really into it, you could always make free hug sign and out you go, right? Out the door and start hugging.
There is some of those on Facebook. And it's really neat to see the responses of people.
Yeah, isn't it wonderful? I just watched a couple of those last week. I think one was out at Bernie Sanders' event, and somebody was in the lineup with a free hug. And then he found somebody else who was doing the same thing, and then they hugged each other. It was a nice feeling that there's people really doing that. And the response was overwhelming. I mean, people just were willing to do that, both individually, as couples, and as groups. So, powerful stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess what I want to leave people with too is that that hugging is like touch 1,000-fold, and sometimes less is more. And so start with that one brief contact and see what happens.
I better be careful with my bear hugs then.
No, I don't think so. I think you should enjoy them and let other people enjoy them too. That's you, right? That's great.
That's me, yeah. And I just have to be careful about who I give a bear hug to, because I need to be sensitive. Well, thank you ever so much. I'm really looking forward to you giving me the link to your open Facebook group. I hope you literally create it in the next 24 hours so we can tell people about it, in the show notes. Also, encouraging people to know how to find you and how to participate in the training so they can have the experience of the closed Facebook group as well. So, yes, thank you ever so much for being on the show. I love what you're talking about. I love your passion. And, go forth and hug.
You too.
All right.
Thanks a lot. I've really like this. It's been great.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
For quality online wellness products, courses, and services, visit our sponsors, theWellnessStore.ca and the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy located at thewellnessacademy.ca. To stay in touch, visit us at thewellnessshow.ca. And until next time, be healthy, wealthy, and wise.